Welcome back to the video lecture on East Asia's cultural influence along the sea. We continue to talk about level of this issue. In particular session, we are going to speak on the legacy of Japanese colonialism. The historical fact that Japan ruled and controlled Korea from 1910 to 1945 caused many international legal issues, some of which have still not been settled between Korea and Japan. The most critical and fundamental question, among others, is whether the Japanese ruling over Korea was based on the ground of international law. In particular, the validity of two treaties, the Treaty of 1905, which deprived the Korea of its diplomatic sovereignty, and the Annexation Treaty of 1910, have been the subject of the much controversy. Upon Korea's signing the Treaty on Basic Relations with Japan in 1965 to normalize the diplomatic relations, the two countries tried to solve unsettled legal issues by concluding additional treaties, such as the agreements on the settlement of the problem concerning property and claims, agreement concerning cultural asset and cultural cooperation, and agreement concerning the legal status and treatment of the Korean residents in Japan. Without any success, the issue on legality or legitimacy of Japan's ruling over Korea under international law was never solved and rather ended up with the vague provisions in the treaty, which in turn raised a matter of interpretation until the present time. Another key issue arising out of the Japanese colonization of Korea is related to Dokdo, a group of small islets in East Sea, because the issue surrounding Dokdo is often raised in a context of Japanese imperialism and expansionism into Korea. Armed conflicts occurred on Korean Peninsula was the issues. For example, there are many interlegal issues arising from the Korean War in the inter-Korean relations, and the armed conflict in the early 1950s has raised a number of important legal issues under international law. This Korean War posed many legal issues, especially related to international humanitarian law, such as the legal characteristic of the armed conflict, the applicability of the rules of engagement, and legal meaning of long-standing ceasefire. As North Korea launched an armed attack against South Korea on June 25, 1950, a series of resolutions were adopted by the UN Security Council, and it was the first time the UN Security Council has authorized the use of force since its inception in 1945, and members of the United Nations acted collectively to repel the aggression. As a veto, by then Soviet Union was frequently used to block the numerous Security Council initiatives during the Korean War. The UN General Assembly adopted a resolution known as Uniting for Peace, which states that if the Security Council fails to exercise its primary responsibility to act as required to maintain international peace and security, due to lack of unanimity of the permanent members, the General Assembly should take over to keep the impetus for peace. While a military demarcation line was drawn on lands at the time of the Inter-Korean Armistice Agreement was signed on May 27, 1953, such demarcation line did not extend it into maritime areas. The seaward extension, known as Northern Limit Line, NLL, which was drawn by the UN Commander General Mark Clark in 1958, remained contentious and caused confrontations between two states, as the NLL was not officially a part of the Armistice Agreement. Some key inter-Korea issues, among others, include the statehood and recognition as well as the legal characteristics of the agreement signed by two Koreas. An issue arises from the provision of the Constitution of the Republic of Korea, which stipulates the territory of the Republic of Korea shall consist of the whole Korean peninsula, while the two Koreas were respectively admitted to the United Nations at the same time. The UN membership issues raise a legal question as to whether the Republic of Korea recognizes North Korea as a state. The issue gets more complicated as a question also arises as to the legal characteristics of the agreements on reconciliation, non-aggression, and exchanges and cooperation between South and North. This is known as the Inter-Korean Basic Agreement signed in 1991, which recognized that relationship between the two Koreas is not a relationship as between states, but rather a special one constituted temporarily in a process of unification. Let me touch upon the role of this issue. Situated at the center of the Northeast Asian state, the waters that surround the three sides of Korea are very important for economic, military, and strategic concerns. Such concerns embrace a wide range of maritime issues, including maritime delimitation and competition for marine resources. Korea has engaged in important legal matters pertaining to law of the sea that are of the vital importance, especially in relation to maritime delimitation in the zones established by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The contribution on the part of Korea in relation to maritime issues include its active engagement in international efforts to protect marine safety and marine environment. There remains the issue of maritime delimitation due to the overlapping claims over the continental shelf with the neighboring countries, such as between Korea and China in the West Sea and between Korea and Japan in the East Sea. Since Korea joined the Convention on International Maritime Organization, IMO, the Korea as a member of A Category Council, with the largest interest in providing international shipping services, has been leading the development of maritime technology, such as the e-navigation, eco-friendly vessels, and autonomous vessels technology. The development of human rights in Korea is closely related to the development of democracy in Korea, achieved through the mass protests against dictatorship and military regime from the 1960s to the 1980s, so that the democracy and the international human rights law is very much important in Korea. With the development of democracy in Korea since early 1990s, Korea began to accept major international human rights treaties, ratifying the International Covenant on Civil Political Rights and its protocol in 1990, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights in 1990. Since then, Korea became the party to major international human rights treaties, such as the Convention on the Rights of the Child and Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment, and optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the involvement of child in the armed conflicts, and the Convention on Rights of the Persons with Disabilities. In 2001, National Human Rights Commission was established as a national human rights advocacy institution, along with several Truth and Reconciliation Commissions to investigate human rights violations under previous authoritarian regimes. One of the recent human rights issues includes the right to consensual objection to military service. Consensual objection has been a topic of much debate in Korea for decades, especially in cases involving jailhouse witnesses. The Supreme Court and Constitutional Court have consistently affirmed the punishment of the consensual objector under Korea's Military Service Act. However, in 2018, the Constitutional Court held that the Korean law that did not recognize consensual objection was not consistent with the Constitution. In the same year, the Supreme Court ruled that consensual objection was justifiable on the Military Service Act. Thank you very much for your attention.